Alrighty, we are less than 3 months away from the big election in November, and big tech's interference in that election continues to be a major concern. We've talked a lot on the show about how social media companies outward censor conservatives. But what's being done in Congress to stop it? Let's bring in Republican Congressman Devin Nunes. Congressman, welcome back to the show.
Great to be with you guys. Thank you.
You bet. Congressman, you're wired into the intel world. You know everything that's happening. First, let me ask you this question. Are you worried about foreign interference in the upcoming election?
Well, I think there's two issues. We have the foreign influence that could come from a nation state like China that has a very technical capability. They own, well, they technically, because it's the Chinese Communist Party, you got to look at TikTok. And I think that is an extreme vulnerability. They're harvesting all of our children's data, young adults, people that are using this information. So that's one issue of foreign interference. You also have the usual clumsy actors. The Russians are always trying to sow discord. We really made that available. The House Republicans talked about what the Russians are always willing to do because Putin just doesn't like democracy, has never liked the United States, sees us as an enemy. So that's always out there. But I will tell you, I think in your opening monologue there, Sean, you hit it right on the head, and that is that I'm really worried about election interference coming from Google, Facebook, and Twitter. That's the most dangerous because they are censoring us left and right. When I say us, meaning conservatives and Republicans.
Well, Congressman, one of the interesting things I think, and you mentioned these big tech companies, is that Forbes had this article that showed 55% of Americans actually consume their news from social media platforms. And we saw what happened recently with Twitter and them hacking people like Joe Biden, Barack Obama. And so you just think the impact that they could have if someone actually hacks these companies, let's say close to election or election day, how big of a concern is that?
Well, I think the key number there is 55%. And that actually is one of the issues that I've been looking at for a long time. And I've always wondered, how is it that when we had the best economy that we've ever had in generations, in 50 years, before the COVID crisis pandemic hit, how was it that Donald Trump was essentially in all kind of the major polls stuck at 45%? Well, I think if you start to do the math, if you look at the content that's developed, and then if you look at the social media companies as disinformation funnels that I like to always, hold up my phone and say that comes right to here and you're always looking at it. If that's being censored, what are the odds that the average Joe American is actually getting the facts? Did average Joe know that it was because of all what Donald Trump and the Republicans did to really reform the tax code, to allow for investment, to allow jobs to be created? My guess is most people in the United States don't know that even happened because that's being censored. And I think the censoring has gotten worse and worse and worse over time. And I think that's the biggest threat that we have during this election. It's not just the media and the content that's being developed. It's the fact that the average Joe American can't even get the facts. Conservatives and Republicans have no way to get their message out to the American people. And that's what troubles me in this election.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think we keep talking about interference. It's happening right in our backyard. They are censoring, they are shadow banning, they're making sure that you don't see certain things, and that should be troubling to every American. And your point is so well taken because you don't even know that you don't know what they're not showing you. That's the big problem. When it comes to TikTok, you brought that up. Are you satisfied if Microsoft buys it? Is that alleviate all of your concerns? Or are you concerned that China may have implanted some kind of backdoor that they'll still be able to get our information?
Well, I mean, look, there'd have to be a lot of research done to figure out, where does all the data go? If this data is ending up in China, in server farms in China, I mean, I think you have there's zero chance that the Chinese Communist Party wouldn't have access to that. Look, I don't want everybody to be pessimistic listening to me here. I think there are some alternatives. They're in the early stage. But what I've asked people to do that want to get the truth is get off of these social media companies that are partisan. Okay, you can go to places like Parler. That's a great place. It actually is it has more capability. It's kind of a combination of Instagram and Facebook and Twitter all in one. There's also a YouTube a different channel now called Rumble. I'm using both of those platforms to reach out because I know that I'm not being censored. And I think that's the key that Republicans have to take for the next 90 days. We can't just complain and say, well, Google sucks, because it's true. Google and Facebook and YouTube, they're totally censoring us. We've known this now for a long time. So what we have to do is we have to go out, win the hearts and minds of the American people, and explain to them that there are different ways to receive their information. And we have to warn those who are oblivious to the fact, to your point, Sean, that, hey, you might be being influenced in this election by these U.S. tech oligarchs and these companies that are essentially arms of the left.
Congressman, we only have about a minute left here, but the president uses Twitter quite a bit. It has definitely helped him get his message out. But do you think that he should switch over to some of these alternatives? Would that be helpful to him?
Yeah, look, I think Twitter's kind of like a sewer farm, and you really need to stay out of it. It did work well for the president back in the 2016 election before they got really brazen in their censoring of conservatives. I think it's fine for the president to kind of put out a message there, but it's really just an echo chamber of hate. And, I'm not saying get off of it completely. I think he still has to be on there. But really, he needs to show the American people that there are other platforms. And, if he got behind, say, Parler and Rumble, it would really change the whole landscape of how we receive and look at our social media, especially if he was to quit Twitter entirely.
Yeah, I think that's important. I appreciate the fact of you highlighting these. We talked about Triller the other day being an alternative to TikTok as well. And I think getting people off these platforms and going to places where they won't be censored sends a real signal as to what we need to do to have a real dialogue. Congressman, again, thank you for sharing your insights and constructive ideas, because this is how we move this issue forward.
Well, Sean, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with both of you today.
Okay, thanks a lot. All right. A few states last night had some key primaries that will make a difference in how we vote in November. We're going to discuss what happened last night and the big takeaways when we come back.